Hello, I'm Tom. This is Alana. We're going to be talking about phishing kits versus financial institutions, the history, OSINT, and automation. I'm Tom. I'm a CrowdStrike certified caffeinated intern. Ask me about pigeons afterwards.
Hello, I'm Alana. I am religious about cafes and coffee. So go to that link and there is a spreadsheet full of 64 different cafes. If you have recommendations, let me know, please, 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 please. Okay, so this talk is not about coffee, it's about phishing kits. So firstly, before we get into some technical stuff, we've got a quick timeline of the evolution of kits in the sector, just to get everyone up to speed. And we're going to start in 2004. One of the earliest recorded instances of phishing kits targeting financial institutions was the Rockfish gang, and they were pretty good at their job. At the time, they were quoted as being responsible for 50% or more of phishing attacks, targeting both European and US organizations, from Citibank to Barclays to Deutsche Bank and many others. They used your typical self-contained kit, where victims would be sent a link, mistakenly enter their credentials, and then the code would send their details to what researchers at the time referred to as the mothership server, i.e. a C2. The first version of this kit had one thing in common. Each website had the /rock path in the URL, which is where they got their name. 2 years later, in 2016, the era of unnecessary acronyms begin as we see phishing as a service. The Mr. Brain kit was the earliest example of phishing kits being distributed on underground forums, impersonating the Bank of America, PayPal, HSBC, and more. Free distribution of kits was a big step in lowering the barrier to entry for criminals. Now you needed a lot less technical knowledge, and you needed to invest less time into programming the kit as it was already pre-made for you. However, when I say freely distributed, there was a bit of a catch. This kit had a very interesting monetization model. And by that, I mean, yes, it was free to use. However, from the start, it was actually just secretly backdoored by the author. So any credentials stolen by any campaign would always be secretly sent to the original author's servers, as well as whoever was running the campaign. 1 year later, in 2007, and we see a big breakthrough in the quality and the sophistication of kits. Away with the days of hard-coded website designs, as criminals now have the ability to import bank logins pages of their choice. But more importantly, these kits now had basic 2FA bypass capabilities. The quote, universal man-in-the-middle kit, as it was called, would now send user-supplied credentials to the real bank to validate their legitimacy, and also be able to request and forward 2FA codes. 2007 also saw a big spike in the volume of phishing emails sent, with almost 1 out of 156 emails sent being phishing attempts. However, this wasn't as much as 2009. The Avalanche Group, literally given their name because of how much phishing traffic sent. The Anti-Phishing Working Group claimed that 66% of all phishing attacks were attributed to this one group. What's special about this group in particular is that they really represent the shift of phishing going from a nuisance to organized crime as a business. They used a botnet of compromised sites for hosting their campaigns, which targeted over 40 financial institutions, and implemented fast flux DNS to make it harder for researchers to analyze. When they were finally raided 7 years later in 2016, authorities seized 39 physical servers, 221 rented servers, and freed 500,000 zombie hosts. Jumping forward to after Avalanche's reign, 9 years later in 2018, the world has changed, and phishing kit design has kept up. Using 16-shot phishing kits as an exemplar of the time, we see hallmarks of modern kits. Anti-analysis techniques like IP blacklists, anti-reversing measures, and geo-restrictions have been implemented. On the business side, we now see a subscription or like a license mechanism where kit operators would pay $70 a month for a license, and usability has become a priority, supporting phishing in 10 languages, mobile banking imitation, and Telegram API integration. And the last kit we'll look at is the Robin Banks. In 2022, we start seeing kits kits implementing real modern 2FA bypasses that capture login session cookies and one-time passcodes. Prices range from $50 a month to $200, but this time it comes with 24/7 customer support for the criminals and frequent patches and software updates free of charge. Also in the modern era, on top of impersonating any bank you can think of, they also start to expand into crypto, impersonating exchanges and anywhere else you might be able to drain a private key. That has been a very brief and by no means complete history of phishing kits. Now, over to Tom to talk about some phishing kit analysis.
So I'll be talking about the life of a phishing kit. A phishing kit begins life as with a developer who writes what's effectively a prefab website for quick deployment. Once a phishing kit is born, it will quickly be discarded by its father and given to less technical criminals to perform phishing attacks with. Phishing kits then enter their natural habitat, cloud hosting. Quite often, commercial hosting is used, things like GCP, DigitalOcean, etc., because it's cheap and IP addresses won't typically get filtered. Bulletproof hosting can be used, but it's easy to filter, more expensive. The benefit of that is that it can obviously not be taken down. Because phishing kits are so quick to deploy, the fact that phishing kits can be taken down so quickly doesn't really matter. You can spin them up faster than they can be taken down. And here's a graph from Trend Micro about the cloud hosting providers used for hosting 16-shop. So here are some images of a phishing kit, rare images of a phishing kit in its natural habitat. I do a lot of reverse engineering, and this is the first time I've been able to do reverse engineering using Sublime Text rather than, say, Binary Ninja or IDA. This is because phishing kit, the people who deploy phishing kits are not very technical, and they will often dump the zip file with the phishing kit on the VPS that they're hosting the website on, making it quite easy to find the source code for the phishing kits. Phishing kits have evolved over time to evade bots and detection. They will have lists of IP addresses and IP ranges that are blacklisted and won't kind of show the phish. And the anti-analysis code is often obfuscated, although interestingly, what I found is that the actual main meat of the phishing site usually isn't super obfuscated, which is interesting. More expensive phishing kits tend to have better obfuscation, better anti-analysis, etc. Then at the end of its life, a phishing kit will exfiltrate the data it's obtained over its life. This is often done, this is often dumped to a file on disk on the VPS, which they can then kind of rip off. Telegram is also commonly used now, and more expensive, more advanced phishing kits will have other exfiltration options. I'm going to hand it back to Alana now.
Cool. So I was curious if we could do some automation in regarding to the discovery of phishing kits, sort of the correlation, and then mapping out sort of infrastructure. If you have not heard of the tool called Kitfisher, it's a fantastic tool. What it does essentially is it takes a big list of URLs as an input from sources like OpenFish or FishTank, places where users have submitted URLs, but they don't, it's not confirmed if they're actually phishing URLs or not. It's just sort of suspicious. The tool will then append .zip to the end of the URL. It will then try to retrieve that zip file. If it's not there, it's going to sort of recursively go down that path until hopefully it does find something. The reason why this works is because sort of deploying kits is very easy. You get a .zip file, you unzip it, it sort of is on your directory of your website, and it works. The problem with that is the default zip tool doesn't actually remove the .zip once it's decompressed, and people are lazy, so they leave them on the web directory, which means we can collect them and then analyze them. So for example, you can see that with the, The next step is correlation. I apologize for the quality on the image, but here's like roughly what the inside of a phishing kit would look like. There are sort of 4 big components. Firstly, you have your landing pages. These are the pages that the user would be sent to, basically, so what the victim would see. Next, we have the assets, your PNGs, your JavaScript files, your CSS files, things that are required for the landing pages to work. Your backend files, so these are things that sort of manage the data that is entered and send it where it's supposed to be. It's also got your anti-analysis techniques and so on. And then finally, just your general web hosting stuff. These can be private, these can be public, yeah. Surprisingly, the most important thing is actually mostly the assets and the landing pages. We noticed that because every landing page is the same, so regardless of which website it's on, everything's going to be the same. You're always going to be calling the exact same files, the same images, the same JavaScript files, which means you can extract them and put them in a list. And once you have that, it's not too difficult to turn that into a URL scan query, where you can search a very, very big database of entries and find every single website which has that exact pattern of calling assets, which after some tweaking to reduce false positives is actually really accurate, which means we can go from one known kit to hundreds and hundreds of sort of IOCs. This is quite useful because oftentimes they aren't just running it on one site, they're running it on like thousands of domains, so that's really good for hunting that. Or vice versa, if they're running it on something like some sort of static hosting, you can't block, I don't know, Amazon as an IOC, but you might want to know the actual path URL. So what we did is now we know this process, we literally automated it, we wrote a script to do it, and we left it running in the background. We managed to turn 793 phishing kits into about 300,000 IOCs, so over 300 times the coverage of kits and sort of infrastructure. All of that has been shipped to GitHub as it was going along. So, yeah. Now over to Tom.
So I'm going to be talking about the economics of phishing kits, where the money is being made effectively. A good case study for this is 16shop. 16shop in 2023 was taken down by Interpol and various other organizations, which means, given it was one of the most prolific phishing kits, and that it's been kind of taken down and we have loads of information about it, is really interesting to look at. It ran from 2017 to 2023, created 150,000 phishing pages, priced between $60 and $150 each, which gives us kind of a range for how much money they would have made. 3 suspects were arrested in connection of building 16shop. So the lower bound, over the 6 years, they made about $9 million. Upper bound is 22.5, which means per person per year, they made between $500 and about $1 million per year, revenue before the expenses of obviously laundering the money, hosting, development, etc. Then the next stage is the criminal gangs, who are actually purchasing the phishing kits. As said before, they are typically less technical, and they actually seem to, on average, lose money on the phishing kit itself. If they're paying between $60 and $150 per phishing kit, looking at the data Interpol had on 16shop, it appeared that on average, each phishing kit generated about $53. Obviously, there will be many phishing kits which didn't generate anything and a few which generated a lot of money. But on average, most criminal gangs actually lost money with phishing kits. And so then we look at the end users, the customers you could call them, the people who have their data harvested by phishing kits. They lose usernames, passwords, credit card details, etc., whatever they fill in on phishing pages. Interpol estimated that 16shop caused about $8 million in loss to end users, customers, whatever you want to call them. And there were 70,000 victims, which means each victim, on average, lost $114. Again, this will be skewed by some victims who lost very little. I mean, a credit card number by itself goes for very little. If their money was kind of spent, then they would obviously lose a lot more. But on average, each user lost $114. So yeah, that was a very, very brief look at phishing kits, their history, the automation, and OSINT around them. We're open to any questions.
Got a question at the back here?
Hi. Could you talk a bit about the victim's data? Because I've seen some phishing kits where it's just like emailed to the phisher, and some where it's maybe like saved as a text file on the web server. And when you are like scanning for malicious infrastructure, do you look for this at all?
Sorry, I didn't catch the end of that.
If the phishing kit is saving passwords into like a text file on the same directory, like often that will be accessible just to the public web. Do you like consider that? Do you download those? Do you log the victims? Because often just the victims list is
you're right. They do often just dump onto the server.
So during your project, did you was
didn't.
that part of your project?
We didn't. I mean, it's
It's a dodgy list of like a big. It's sensitive data to be handling.
yeah, it's a dodgy thing to have on our computers. The phishing kits themselves already kind of bad enough. I don't think we want kind of people's credit card details in the thousands.
Okay. I'll talk to you this after this.
No, thank you. And over here, I think there's a question.
I was curious about the loss-making phishing kit statistics, because obviously, like any industry where you're like, hey, it costs you X to get into it and you will make half X, that's not a good business, and yet it persists. So if these phishing kits are lying dormant, as in never ever being used but perhaps being purchased, that makes sense as the average. But why would somebody buy way more money's worth of stuff than they are getting money in from using them? Is it possible that there is profit that's not being seen? And finally, do you have any advice on how to get my $53 up to a decent number?
So what's likely happening is there are a lot of people who make a lot of money from phishing, but they will attract many of the people who think they can make money from phishing. And if you have $100 and you want to make some money, that's not a very high bar to cross. So you could buy a phishing kit, not really know how to deploy it, and not get any victims from it, which I imagine is what's going on. Obviously, if you buy a phishing kit, you know what you're doing, it's a good phishing kit, etc., you're likely to make a lot of money. To answer your question about the $53, do your research, look at the other competitors within the market, see what they're doing, and try to find a gap.
Got another question here?
So, fascinating talk, Tom and Alana, as per. Just quickly, just talking about the architecture of those phishing kits. Where would you include the pigeons for maximum effect?
See, this is so evidently the reason why most people lose money on phishing kits is because of the lack of pigeons. I think this is just proof of the pigeon theory.
Any other questions? Pigeon related, ideally. One more up the back here.
If I'm looking for a pigeon picture to put in my phishing kit, what should I be looking for?
Sorry, what was that?
If I'm looking for a pigeon picture to put in a phishing kit, what should I be looking for, like in a pigeon picture?
So actually, Scott wanted a high-resolution picture of a pigeon to put into the talk announcement. I found that if you sign up to some stock image websites, you sign up and it'll give you like some number of free images, and I managed to find like, I think it was a 8K or a 10K resolution pigeon picture. And so obviously, kind of the more pixels, the better. I would look there.
Amazing. Any other questions or statements about pigeons and/or phishing kits? No. Well, massive round of applause to Alana and Tom.